Hello everyone, welcome to the Narcissism Decoder. I'm Dr. Anthony Mazzella. On this channel, we go beyond labels and symptoms to explore the inner, often unconscious, emotional world behind narcissistic and related personality patterns. In these short clips from the full podcast, you'll get a clear, compassionate, psychodynamic insight into behavior. Whether intense feelings live in you or you're watching them in someone you care about, the goal is the same: to understand what's really going on with the emotions and approach them with perspective, compassion, and room to breathe. Here's a short clip from the podcast that highlights what this looks like in real life. Hello everyone. In today's video, I'll be taking you behind the scenes and walking you through my thinking process as I develop material on a course that I'm teaching: borderline and narcissistic personality organizations. That's the course. And what I've been doing is, in a series of podcast episodes, I've been sharing my thoughts and thinking process in terms of getting the content ready for the class. Since this is the 5th episode in this mini-series, I want to briefly revisit a few of the core ideas we've covered so far, especially what's happening in the inner world of narcissistic and borderline personalities, not just the behaviors that we see on the surface. We talked about narcissistic personalities and how they tend to retreat into self-sufficiency, while people with borderline structures often move toward the other with a kind of intense emotional hunger, longing for someone who will finally soothe them, attune to them, and fill that deep sense of deprivation. When stress rises and the other person isn't available to soothe, regulate, or meet a deeper need, self-reflection can collapse into immediate action. For some people with borderline organization, relating becomes very literal rather than symbolic or reflective. And here I spoke quite a bit about a literal mode of functioning versus a representational mode of functioning. So part of the treatment, and we spent some time on this as well, is gaining the capacity to play psychologically, to move from that literal mode where everything feels concrete and urgent into a more symbolic space where feelings, thoughts, and relationships can be reflected on, can be imagined, and can be held in mind. That's what we call thinking. We also started to anchor all of this in the concept of object constancy, this ability to hold on to a stable, caring sense of another person, even when they're not physically or emotionally present, even when they are disagreeing or see something a different way. When that capacity is fragile, it can feel as if the relationship disappears the moment the other isn't available, and emotional arousal shoots up, leading to emotional dysregulation. This is one of the ways to make sense out of emotional storms, the ruptures, the constant chaos, and the intense fear and conviction that you've been abandoned. We talked about the importance of containment in treatment. Well, I say in treatment, but that could be containment in healing relationships or calming your own emotional storms. Being less focused on facts or explanations and more attuned to the hidden meanings and unbearable feelings underneath the manifest behaviors, so that those feelings can gradually be named, held, and metabolized. There's still so much more to review in terms of what we covered already, but I'm eager to get into what we haven't yet explored. I hope this little review helped you consolidate some of the key organizing ideas that we've been working with so far, so that they could stay alive in your mind as we move forward into what we haven't yet explored. What we haven't yet compared is borderline rage with narcissistic rage, or even the deeper state that we might call hatred. So in the next few videos, I want to really look at 3 questions. First, what is rage psychodynamically? What function does it serve inside the personality? Second, what is hatred? And how is it different from rage? And third, how do these states show up differently in narcissistic versus borderline structures? As always, my goal here isn't just to pathologize emotion. It's to understand what the rage is doing for you, what it protects, what it wards off, and how it tries in its own way to stabilize a very fragile internal world. At a very high level, you could think about rage functioning differently in borderline versus narcissistic personalities. In borderline organization, rage is usually a protest against abandonment, terror that the relationship is slipping away or that the person they depend on has emotionally disappeared. In narcissistic organization, rage is much more about shame and humiliation, a reaction to feeling exposed, criticized, or made to feel small. The anger is used to restore control, superiority, or even distance. So while the borderline may look similar on the surface, psychologically, they're serving the rage, the anger, it's serving a very different purpose. When we focus on anger in borderline organization, we're really zeroing in on just one of the diagnostic criteria. And just to be clear, I'm not pretending the others don't exist. I actually reviewed a few of them at the start of this video, precisely so we could hold the whole picture in mind while we take a closer look at the anger and the rage. In fact, I'm focusing on rage and anger precisely because it's so deeply intertwined with, one, the intense fear of abandonment, which of course is a big part of borderline organization, unstable and intense relationships. As you can imagine, rage interferes with stability in relationships, impulsivity, which is often fueled by emotional arousal and anger, and affective instability, which we call labile. But basically, those are the rapid emotional shifts that you often see in the borderline organization, all of which are either organized around anger or quickly activated. So the anger doesn't exist in isolation. It's wrapped into the entire emotional universe of the borderline experience. And this is one of the key differences with narcissism. Both narcissistic and borderline organization can show anger and aggression. But in narcissism, anger is often expressed indirectly. I say often because not always. Think about more of the malignant narcissist. But oftentimes it's shown through contempt, withdrawal, guilt-inducing comments, or subtle devaluation. The covert or more vulnerable narcissistic pattern may look needy or injured on the surface, but the anger is still there. It's just channeled into a different relational stance. In borderline organization, the anger is often closer to the surface, hotter, more immediate, more intertwined with panic and losing the relationship. It's also important to note that many people with borderline traits never act aggressively. That really deserves its own discussion, and perhaps we'll cover that in a future video, because it involves thinking about the different presentations of how anger can be managed, expressed, or turned against oneself. What actually causes the anger in borderline personality disorder? And at a slightly deeper level, the question becomes, what purpose does the anger serve? Why is it so necessary? And why is it needed so urgently? Yes, I am suggesting that the anger, aggression, and hatred, as crazy as this must sound to you, are serving an important function. If you want to hear more about the purpose, stay tuned, because we have to stop here for today. But there's, of course, still so much more to say about what purpose anger serves to stabilize one's emotional inner life. There's still so much more to explore about this topic and related dynamics. If you're finding this discussion helpful and you want to learn more about the various facets of narcissism and related personality organizations, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video clip. If you want to do an even deeper dive, check out my podcast. I go into far more detail there. Okay, until next time, take care of yourself. Bye for now.